Hello, I'm Jake, and my family turned my dream home into a nightmare. They called me selfish, spread lies that I'd bought it from my cousin, then left a child on my porch to guilt me. But the worst? The forged contract claiming my house and the Kickstarter scam that painted me as a traitor. I was heartbroken, betrayed by those I trusted most. How far would they go to steal my life? Stick around to find out. Jake gripped the keys to his new Asheville home, their edges biting into his palm, a hard-won symbol of everything he'd fought for. The living room stretched before him, its exposed brick walls catching the golden slant of late afternoon light, the cedar scent of fresh-stained floors mingling with mountain air from an open window. A skylight in the kitchen glowed softly, promising mornings of coffee in quiet solitude. This wasn't just a house, it was his defiance, built from years of welding steel and sweltering shops, of skipping rides on his battered motorcycle to save every dollar, of carrying his family's burdens without a word. Standing there, alone, he felt the weight of choosing himself for the first time, and it was electric. He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of the wraparound porch, its wood gleaming under a fresh coat, and posted it on Instagram with a single line, "My own space." The pride was raw, a spark in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He imagined nights here, tools organized in the garage, maybe a fire pit in the yard. The world could wait. It didn't. His phone buzzed almost instantly, a text from his Aunt Marie flashing on the screen. He ignored it, expecting a grudging, "Well done." Then another buzz, a third. A call came through, Marie's name like a warning. He answered, propping himself against the kitchen counter, the granite cool against his calloused hands. "Jake," Marie said, her voice sharp, slicing past pleasantries. "You bought a house and didn't think about Lucas?" The question Jake froze, the words landing like a spark on dry grass. Lucas, his cousin, the musician who'd been drifting from one friend's couch to another since his last band crashed. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice rough, stepping toward the living room's brick wall. "4 bedrooms, Marie said, her tone venomous. "You're alone and Lucas can't even afford a studio. You know he's struggling. How do you think that looks?" Jake's fingers tightened around the phone, his boots scuffing the new floorboards. "I earned this," he said, low and deliberate. "My money, my name on every paper." Marie's laugh was bitter, cutting. "No one's saying you don't deserve it, but family looks out for family. Lucas needs a roof, stability. You've got all that space and no one to share it with." The word stung, twisting the empty rooms around him into something hollow. No one to share it with. He saw the bare walls, the unpacked boxes, not as freedom, but as a void she'd weaponized. "He's had years to get it together," Jake said, his voice hardening. "I'm not his keeper." "You don't mean that," she snapped. "You used to care about him." Jake stopped under the skylight, sunlight warm on his shoulders. He thought of the years he'd cared, paying Lucas's bar tabs, hauling his amps to gigs, covering their uncle's hospital bill when the family was broke. He'd welded through blisters, eaten ramen to make ends meet, while Lucas chased dreams that never landed. "I care," he said, quieter but firm, "but not like this. But not—" Marie's voice turned cold. "This isn't how we raised you, Jake." A pause, heavy then a click. She was gone. The silence roared louder than her voice. The house, his sanctuary moments ago, felt charged, like a wire about to snap. Jake checked his phone. Texts flooded in, from cousins, an old neighbor, even a shop client. "So proud you're helping Lucas out," one said. "Great move for your cousin," another read. His stomach knotted. He'd only told Marie about the house, yet the story was already warping, spreading like oil on water. He stepped onto the porch, the evening air sharp with pine. Fireflies flickered in the dusk, but his mind churned. This wasn't a mix-up. Marie hadn't just lashed out, she'd lit a fuse. He knew Lucas's tricks, sob stories that bent truth, breakdowns that faded under scrutiny. And Marie, with her knack for rallying family, was the match. Another text buzzed. Marie again. "We need to talk, Jake." His jaw clenched. Jake had spent his life as the fixer, patching family messes, swallowing his own wants. This house was his stand, his proof he could build something for himself. But as his phone lit up with another message, he felt the fight closing in. This wasn't about a house. It was about who he was allowed to be. He didn't sleep that night. The keys sat on the counter, glinting under the skylight, a reminder of what he'd won and what he'd have to defend. "What's the toughest family expectation you've faced?" Jake stood on the wraparound porch of his Asheville home, the pine-scented dusk settling over the street like a veil. Fireflies blinked in the distance, but their soft glow couldn't cut through the storm brewing in his chest. Marie's call from the night before echoed in his mind, her sharp accusation that he'd failed Lucas by buying the house for himself, her cold dismissal of his years of sacrifice. The texts from relatives praising a generosity he hadn't offered burned like splinters under his skin. He'd gone to bed hoping it was a flare-up, a misunderstanding that would fade by morning. But as he woke to the soft light filtering through the kitchen skylight, his phone told a different story. The screen glowed with notifications, each one a fresh wound. A cousin, Ellie, texted, "So happy you're giving Lucas a new start." An old family friend wrote, "Lucas deserves this house. You're a good man, Jake." His uncle's neighbor, someone he hadn't seen since he was a kid, sent, "Proud you put family first." Jake's jaw tightened as he scrolled, the cedar scent of the floors now stifling. He hadn't told anyone but Marie about the house, yet the narrative had spread overnight, a wildfire of lies claiming he'd bought it for Lucas. He set the phone down on the granite counter, its weight heavier than the keys he'd held yesterday. This wasn't a mix-up. It was a story, crafted and circulated, and he was losing control of it. He poured coffee, the mug's warmth grounding him as he paced the living room, boots scuffing the new floorboards. The exposed brick walls, which had felt like a triumph yesterday, now seemed to close in. He thought back to the years he'd been the fixer, paying Lucas's bar tabs when his gigs fell through, hauling his guitar to dive bars, covering their Uncle Tom's physical therapy when insurance wouldn't. He'd welded steel through summer heat, his hands blistered, while Lucas chased fleeting applause. Jake had never complained, not when he ate canned beans to stretch a paycheck, not when he skipped his own dreams to keep the family afloat. But this house, with its skylight and porch, was his. Why couldn't they see that? Another buzz pulled him back, a message from Marie. "You need to call me, Jake. This is serious." He ignored it, his pulse quickening. He knew her tactics, guilt dressed as concern, words sharpened to cut. Instead, he opened Instagram, where the comments under his post had multiplied. "Lucas is so lucky to have you," one read. "When's he moving in?" asked another. A stranger tagged by a cousin wrote, "Real family steps up. Nice work." Jake's stomach churned. The lie had grown legs, sprinting beyond the family into Asheville's tight-knit community, where gossip spread faster than mountain fog. He stepped into the garage, his workshop half set up, tools scattered among unpacked boxes. The familiar smell of metal and oil steadied him, a reminder of the life he'd built with his own hands. He tried to focus, sorting wrenches, but his mind replayed Marie's voice. "You used to care." Did he? He thought of Lucas, always one step from a breakthrough, always needing a bailout. The time Jake lent him $500 for a demo tape, only to find out Lucas spent half on a vintage jacket. The night he drove 3 hours to pick Lucas up from a bar, his cousin slurring apologies while Jake missed a job deadline. Caring had always meant cleaning up Lucas's messes, but this time Jake had chosen himself, and they hated him for it. The phone rang again. Marie. He let it go to voicemail, but her message came through seconds later, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Jake, I didn't want to upset you, but Lucas is in a bad place. You know how hard it's been for him. That house could change everything. Call me." He deleted it, his fingers trembling. The shift from anger to pity was textbook Marie, a bait and switch to pull him back in. He wasn't falling for it, not this time. Mid-morning, he headed to the shop, the hum of Asheville's artsy streets a faint distraction. The welding shop, tucked between a brewery and an art co-op, was his second home, its clang of metal and hiss of torches a language he spoke fluently. Sam, his co-worker, was already there, grinding a steel beam, sparks flying like tiny comets. He gave Jake a nod, sensing the weight in his step. "Rough night?" Sam asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "You could say that," Jake muttered, tossing his jacket on a bench. He didn't elaborate, but the phone in his pocket buzzed again, another text from a distant aunt. "Lucas says you're helping him settle in. God bless you." Jake's chest tightened. He showed Sam the message, his voice low. "They're saying I bought the house for Lucas. I didn't." Sam frowned, setting down his grinder. "That's messed up. Marie's doing?" "Has to be," Jake said, leaning against a workbench. "She's got everyone believing it." Sam shook his head. "You can't let that slide, man. People talk and talk sticks." Jake nodded, but the idea of fighting back felt like stepping into a trap. He'd never been one for public drama. His life was in the welds, the steady rhythm of work. But as he fired up his torch, the flames blew heart steadying him. He couldn't shake the feeling that silence was letting them win. The lie wasn't just about the house. It was about who he was, who they'd always expected him to be. By afternoon, the shop was buzzing with clients, but Jake's focus frayed. A regular picking up a repaired gate hesitated before leaving. "Heard about your cousin," she said, her tone cautious. "Nice of you to give him a place." Jake forced a smile, explaining Lucas was never promised the house, but her skeptical nod cut deeper than words. The narrative had reached strangers, seeping into the community like ink and water. Back home, Jake sat on the porch, the mountain air sharp against his skin. He opened his phone to another voicemail, this time from his Uncle Tom. The man's voice was calm, measured, the kind of calm that hit a blade. "Jake, people are talking," Tom said. "Marie might have said something, but it's no big deal if you do right by Lucas. You wouldn't have that shop without us, you know. We believed in you. Now he needs you." Jake's breath caught. The shop, his shop, was built on loans he'd paid off, on nights he'd worked until dawn. Tom and Marie had loaned him $2,000 for a welding course years ago, and he'd repaid it with interest, plus years of favors. But here was Tom, rewriting history, framing it as a debt Jake could never settle. "You're missing the point," Tom continued. "Family's about stepping up, not keeping score." Jake ended the playback, his hands shaking. He stared at the porch's wood grain, the knots like eyes watching him. This wasn't about fairness or misunderstanding. It was a script, Marie's emotional pull, Tom's calculated push, the family's chorus amplifying the lie. They were boxing him in, making the decision for him before he could fight back. He stood, pacing the porch, the fireflies gone now, swallowed by the dark. He thought of the house, its brick walls and skylight, the first thing he'd ever claimed for himself. They wanted to take it, not with force, but with guilt, with stories spun to shame him. Jake's fingers curled into fists. He'd been the fixer too long, the one who bent so others wouldn't break. But this time he wouldn't bend. The fight was just beginning, and he wasn't sure what scared him more, their next move or the part of him still tempted to give in. Have you ever had to fight a lie someone spread about you? Jake sat on the edge of his Asheville porch, the morning air sharp with pine, his coffee gone cold in the mug beside him. The cedar scent of his new home lingered, but the pride he'd felt days ago was buried under a growing dread. Marie's accusations, Tom's calculated guilt, and the flood of texts praising him for a house he hadn't given Lucas had twisted his victory into a trap. The Instagram comments, strangers assuming Lucas was moving in, still stung, each one proof of a lie spreading faster than he could contain. He'd ignored Marie's last voicemail, her fake softness a hook he refused to bite. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was heavy, like the moment before a weld cracks under pressure. He wandered inside, the skylight casting pale light across the living room's brick walls. Unpacked boxes lined the floor, a reminder of the life he'd meant to start here. He tried to focus, hanging a shelf in the garage, the clink of tools a faint anchor. But his mind churned with memories of being the fixer. At 16, he'd worked weekends at a scrapyard to cover Lucas's music lessons, while his cousin skipped practice for parties. At 20, he'd lent Lucas $800 for a guitar, only to find it pawned a month later. Jake had eaten rice and beans for weeks to make rent, never saying a word. He'd thought it was loyalty, maybe love. Now, staring at his wrench, he saw it for what it was, a role they'd cast him in, the one who carried their weight so Lucas could float. The quiet stretched for 3 days, no texts, no calls, no new Instagram posts, twisting his story. Jake scrubbed the kitchen counters, sanded a porch rail, anything to fill the void. The stillness should have been a relief, but it felt staged, like a predator holding its breath. He checked his doorbell camera twice a day, half expecting Lucas to show up with another sob story. He wanted to believe they'd backed off, that Marie and Tom had seen his resolve and let it go, but doubt gnawed at him. Lucas's crises were never accidents. They were performances timed for maximum impact, and Marie's silence was too neat, too deliberate. Late on the third night, Jake was in the garage, sorting bolts under a fluorescent hum, when his phone lit up. A text from Lucas. "I'm done pretending I'm okay. Maybe I'll just disappear." The words hit like a spark on kindling. Jake's pulse spiked, his fingers hovering over the screen. Was this real? He'd seen Lucas's stunts before, faking a breakdown to dodge a bar fight, crying to Marie when Jake refused to cover another debt. But this felt different, the vagueness sharp enough to cut. He paced, the concrete floor cold through his socks, memories flooding back. The time Lucas lost Jake's tools and blamed a bandmate, leaving Jake to replace them on a stretched budget. The night Lucas crashed Jake's motorcycle, then laughed it off while Jake worked overtime to fix it. Every crisis was a script, and Jake had always played his part. He stopped, staring at the text again. If this was a cry for help, ignoring it could haunt him. If it was a ploy, replying would pull him into Lucas's game. He called Lucas's bandmate, Trey, whose voice was thick with worry. "He left an hour ago," Trey said. "Said something about the French Broad River. He's not answering. I don't know if he's serious, man." Jake's stomach dropped. The river, its dark currents winding through Asheville, was no casual mention. He hung up, his breath uneven, and opened his laptop. Years of dealing with Lucas had taught him to check facts. He pulled up local hospital intakes, police logs, nothing under Lucas's name, no reports of trouble by the river. Still, the text burned in his mind, a hook he couldn't fully shake. Jake grabbed a notebook from a drawer, one he kept for shop invoices, and jotted the date, time, and Trey's words. He saved Lucas's text, time-stamped, and checked his cameras, ensuring they were recording. If this turned legal, he'd have proof. The precaution felt cold, but necessary. He'd spent too long trusting Lucas's tears only to find them dry when the spotlight shifted. He closed the laptop, the garage's metal tang grounding him. He wasn't running to the river, not this time, but he couldn't sleep either. The house's silence now a pulse, alive with what might come next. The next morning, Jake drove to the welding shop, the mountain roads blurred by fog. Sam was there, grinding a rail, sparks dancing like fireflies. "You look rough," Sam said, pausing his work. Jake showed him the text, his voice low. "Lucas pulled this last night, said he might disappear." Sam's eyes narrowed. "Sounds like a stunt. You call him out?" "Not yet," Jake said, firing up his torch, "but I'm not chasing him either." "Good," Sam said. "He's playing you. Don't let him." Jake nodded, the torch's blue flame steadying his hands. But as he welded, a client's voice broke his focus. "Heard about Lucas," the man said, picking up a repaired frame. "You really stepping up for him with that house?" Jake's jaw clenched. He explained again that the house was his, not Lucas's, but the man's polite smile said he didn't buy it. The lie had rooted deeper, spreading through Asheville's coffee shops and art co-ops, where whispers carried weight. Back on the porch that evening, Jake watched the sky turn bruise purple, the air thick with coming rain. He'd wanted this house to be his refuge, a place to build a life free of the family's demands. But now it felt like a battlefield. Every brick a line he had to defend. Lucas's text, Marie's silence, Tom's veiled threats, they weren't random. They were pieces of a plan, one he couldn't yet see. He gripped the porch rail, its wood solid under his palms. He'd been the fixer too long, the one who bent so others could break free. But bending now would mean losing himself. The storm was coming, and he'd have to face it head on. "What's the hardest family drama you've had to navigate?" Jake leaned against the kitchen counter of his Asheville home, the skylight's morning glow dimmed by a brewing storm outside. The cedar scent of the floors, once a comfort, now felt suffocating as his phone buzzed relentlessly. Lucas's text from 3 nights ago, "I'm done pretending I'm okay," still lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. The silence from Marie and Tom had been too calculated, and the Instagram comments praising him for a house he hadn't given Lucas had spread like wildfire. He'd hoped the rumors would fade, but as he scrolled through his notifications, a new blow landed, a video from Lucas, posted late last night, tagged with his name. Jake pressed play, his pulse quickening. Lucas's face filled the screen, eyes red and glistening, his voice trembling. "I thought Jake was family," he said, staring into the camera. "He promised we'd share this house, said it was for both of us. Now he's locked me out, left me with nothing." The words were a gut punch, each one a lie polished to cut deep. Lucas's tears looked real, but Jake knew better. His cousin had always been a performer, turning pain into a stage. Below the video, a Kickstarter link screamed, "Help me rebuild after my cousin's betrayal." The page painted Lucas as a struggling artist, abandoned by family, his pet cat spun as a dependent for sympathy. Jake's hands shook as he clicked the link. The goal was $10,000, with $800 already pledged by strangers, cousins, even a local barista Jake recognized. Comments poured in. "How could you do this to your own blood? Jake, you're heartless." An old shop client wrote, "Always knew you were selfish." The accusations hit like sparks on dry wood, igniting a fury he could barely contain. He'd never promised Lucas anything. Not a room, not a key, not a dime. Yet here was his cousin, rewriting their lives for a digital audience, and Asheville was eating it up. He slammed the phone down, the granite counter cold under his palms. The living room's brick walls seemed to pulse, his house no longer a refuge but a prize in a war he hadn't chosen. He thought of the years he'd carried Lucas, paying his fines, fixing his mistakes, swallowing resentment to keep the family intact. This wasn't just a lie. It was a theft, not of the house, but of Jake's truth, his right to be more than their fixer. At the welding shop, the air thick with metal and sparks, Jake tried to lose himself in work. Sam was grinding a beam, his eyes narrowing as Jake walked in. "You see that video?" Sam asked, setting down his tool. "Yeah," Jake said, his voice tight, firing up his torch. "Lucas is saying I promised him the house, posted a Kickstarter too." Sam cursed under his breath. "That's low. You gonna call him out?" Jake hesitated, the torch's blue flame steadying his hands. "Don't know yet." He wanted to fight back, to post the truth, but the idea of airing family dirt online felt like sinking to Lucas's level. He'd always kept his battles private, solved them with work, not words. But as he welded, a client interrupted, her voice tentative. "Is it true about Lucas?" she asked, clutching a repaired railing. "People are saying you left him homeless." Jake's jaw clenched. "He was never promised anything," he said, forcing calm. "That's my house, my money." The client nodded, but her eyes held doubt, a mirror of the town's whispers. The lie had seeped into Asheville's art co-ops and breweries, where gossip was currency. Back home, Jake's phone buzzed again. A text from Marie. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." The words were a blade, confirming her hand in Lucas's stunt. He pictured her coaching him, shaping the video's tears, the Kickstarter's sob story. His anger flared, but beneath it was something colder. Betrayal, not just of him, but of the family they'd claimed to be. He opened his laptop, drafting a post to set the record straight. Screenshots of Lucas's text, proof of his lies. But his finger hovered over send. Going public felt like stepping into a trap, giving them the stage they craved. Another buzz, a voicemail from Tom, his voice smooth, deliberate. "Jake, this is getting out of hand," he said. "People believe Lucas because they know you're better than this. Do right by him, and it'll all go away." The words were a velvet threat, twisting Jake's integrity into a leash. Tom hadn't mentioned the Kickstarter, but Jake felt his fingerprints on it, the same strategic calm that had guilted him for years. Jake stood pacing the porch, the mountain air heavy with rain. He thought of the house, its skylight, its cedar floors, the first thing he'd ever claimed for himself. They weren't just after the deed. They wanted his will, his right to say no. He'd been the fixer too long, bending under their expectations. But now, with Lucas's video burning through his community, he saw the cost of staying silent. The fight wasn't just for the house, it was for who he was allowed to be. And as the first raindrops fell, he knew he couldn't let them write the ending. "What's the worst betrayal you've faced from someone close?" Jake stood in the kitchen of his Asheville home, the skylight dim under a slate-gray dawn. Rain pattered on the cedar floors, mirroring the storm in his chest. Lucas's Kickstarter video accusing Jake of stealing his promised house had turned Asheville against him. Clients at the welding shop whispered, Instagram comments stung, and Marie's texts hinted at a deeper plan. Tom's voicemail, cloaked in calm, had tried to guilt him into surrender. Jake hadn't responded, but the weight of their lies pressed harder each day, turning his house into a battleground. He sipped coffee, the mug's warmth a faint anchor, when a thud outside snapped him alert. He crossed to the front door, the porch's wood slick underfoot, and froze. A stroller sat there, rain beating on its canopy. Inside, Lucas's nephew Eli, barely 4, slept, his tiny chest rising under a blanket. A suitcase leaned nearby, a note tucked in its handle. "Be the family I need." Jake's blood roared. Lucas hadn't called, hadn't warned, just abandoned a child to twist his arm. He brought Eli inside, setting him on the couch, the boy's soft snores cutting through Jake's rage. He checked his doorbell camera. Lucas's car, parked a block away, sped off at 4:17 a.m. Jake's hands shook as he dialed the police, filing an incident report to document the stunt. He wasn't playing Lucas's game, but Eli's presence, a living pawn in their war, cracked something in him. He thought of the years he'd fixed Lucas's messes, bailing him out of bar fights, covering his debts, all while Lucas skated free. This was different, a line crossed that left Jake's house feeling less like home and more like a trap. He sat by Eli, the living room's brick walls closing in. He'd wanted to be done with the family's demands, to claim this house as his own. But Lucas had weaponized a child, banking on Jake's guilt. Jake's mind flashed to a memory. 6 years ago, he'd skipped a welding job to watch Eli when Lucas forgot him at a gig. Jake had fed him, played with him while Lucas partied. He'd done it then, but now he wouldn't bend. By noon, Jake had arranged for Eli's mother, Lucas's sister-in-law, to pick him up. She apologized, mortified, claiming Lucas said Jake offered to babysit. Another lie, but Jake just nodded, handing over the stroller. The rain had stopped, leaving the porch slick and cold. He stood there staring at the empty street when his phone buzzed, a message from Elena, his lawyer, hired after Tom's veiled threats. "Check your email," it read. "Urgent." Jake opened his laptop, the kitchen's granite counter cool under his elbows. Elena had sent a scanned document, a family loan agreement dated 2012, claiming Tom funded Jake's welding shop, entitling the family to 40% of his house. The signature, his name, was a clumsy forgery, the paper's details riddled with errors, wrong shop address, inflated loan amounts. Jake's laugh was bitter. He'd built the shop with bank loans and sweat, not Tom's money. The $2,000 they'd lent for a welding course was repaid a decade ago, yet here they were, rewriting history to claim his home. He forwarded the document to Elena, his fingers steady but his chest tight. "This is fake," he typed. "What's next?" Her reply was swift. "File it. It's evidence. They're escalating." Jake saved the email, his mind racing. The forgery wasn't just a grab for the house. It was a move to break him, to make him doubt his own truth. He thought of Marie's texts, Lucas's video, Tom's calm demands. They weren't reacting. They were orchestrating, each step planned to wear him down. At the shop, Sam was welding, sparks flying like tiny stars. Jake showed him the document, his voice low. "They're saying they own part of my house," he said. "Forged my name," Sam whistled, setting down his torch. "That's bold. You fighting this?" "Have to," Jake said, gripping a wrench. "They're not stopping." A client approached, hesitating. "Heard about your cousin," she said. "People at the co-op are saying you're dodging family debts." Jake's gut twisted. The art co-op, Asheville's gossip hub, was now spinning the forgery as truth. He explained the document was fake, but her tight smile said the town had already judged him. Back on the porch that evening, Jake watched the sky clear, stars piercing the dusk. The house, its skylight, its cedar floors, was his, but their lies had tainted it. Eli's stroller, the forged contract, the co-op whispers. They were weapons, aimed at his will, not just his deed. He'd been the fixer, the one who carried their failures. But now, with the weight of their betrayal sinking in, he saw the fight for what it was, a battle for his right to exist, to be more than their tool. The rain had passed, but the storm was far from over. What's the boldest move you've seen someone pull to get their way? Jake gripped the steering wheel, the Asheville dawn painting the mountains in cold gray. His house, its skylight, cedar floors, brick walls, was under siege. Lucas's Kickstarter scam, accusing Jake of stealing his home, had turned neighbors into skeptics. Eli's stroller left on the porch, the forged contract claiming 40% of his deed, and Marie and Tom's relentless guilt had pushed him to a breaking point. He wasn't their fixer anymore. Today, he'd end it. He pulled up to the rancher where he'd grown up, its peeling paint a shadow of his past. Marie opened the door, her eyes sharp, but Jake cut through her silence. "You forged my name," he said, stepping into the kitchen where Tom sat, his calm a familiar mask. "You left Eli on my porch. You lied to everyone. It stops now." Marie's voice cracked, rehearsed. "We did it for Lucas. He's lost, Jake. That house could save him." "I saved him for years," Jake said, his tone hard. "Paid his debts, carried your weight. This is my house. You don't get to claim it." Tom leaned forward, voice smooth. "We gave you everything, your shop, your start. Lucas deserves a chance." Jake slid the forged contract across the table. "I paid you back. The shop's mine. You're done." He held Tom's gaze. "Stop or I expose every lie." Marie's tears fell, but Jake saw the calculation in her eyes. "You'd destroy us?" she asked. "You destroyed us," he said, walking out. The door slammed, a final note. He felt no triumph, only clarity. He was free of their script. Back home, Jake stood under the skylight, the granite counter cool under his hands. Lucas's video was still gaining traction, and the art co-op's whispers branded him a traitor. Silence wasn't enough. He opened his laptop, uploading an Instagram post with evidence. Lucas's text threatening to disappear, the police report from Eli's abandonment, the forged contract's clumsy signature. His caption was blunt. "This is their truth. I bought my house. They want it. Here's the proof. Notifications surged. Friends, clients, strangers. "Stay strong, Jake," one wrote. "Lucas is a fraud," said another. A cousin apologized. "I didn't know." The post spread, shredding the family's narrative. Jake exhaled, not joy but relief. He wasn't fighting for applause, he was fighting for his life. Elena, his lawyer, called the next morning. "Your post hit hard," she said. "Kickstarter shut down Lucas's campaign after fraud reports. But there's more." A realtor had contacted her. "Marie, Tom, and Lucas toured your house before you bought it," Elena said. "They thought it was for Lucas, talked about family plans." Jake's chest tightened. They'd walked his floors, planned his future before he'd even signed. It wasn't greed, it was entitlement, seeing him as their tool. "That's evidence," he said, voice low. "Use it." "Already on it," Elena said. "We're pushing for a restraining order." That night, a voicemail from Lucas buzzed through. "You think you've won, Jake?" His voice dripped venom. "This isn't over." Jake saved it, forwarding it to Elena. The threat didn't shake him. It sharpened his resolve. Lucas wasn't desperate. He was cornered. Days later, Elena called again. "Their claim's dead," she said. "No lawyer, no case. The forgery's too obvious. Restraining orders filed." Jake nodded, the words sinking in. At the shop, Sam grinned. "You buried them, man." Jake shrugged. He hadn't wanted a fight, just a home. The Kickstarter was gone, donations refunded. Instagram turned. Locals who'd shunned him now nodded, some apologizing. The co-op's gossip faded, replaced by murmurs of others burned by family. Jake stayed quiet, done with their stage. He wanted his house back, not their approval. He bought terracotta paint, its warmth like mountain clay, and coated a bedroom. Each stroke erased their grip. Lucas's lies, Marie's guilt, Tom's threats. The cedar scent blended with paint, the skylight glowing, and the house was his again. He sat on the porch, pine air sharp, the wood solid beneath him. The fight had scarred him, but it had freed him. Marie's voicemail came a week later, soft, inviting him to a barbecue. No hard feelings. Jake deleted it, her pull gone. He'd chosen peace, stronger than their games. The stars glittered above Asheville, and he let them hold him. A month later, Jake's life steadied. The shop buzzed, new clients drawn by his story. He hiked with a local group, their banter a quiet anchor. A welder messaged, inspired to cut off a toxic brother. Jake didn't reply, but it warmed him. He wasn't alone. His house was home, tools in the garage, a sketch pad open, plans for a fire pit. Under the skylight, coffee steaming, he looked at the mountains sharp against the dawn. He was free, not just to live, but to be. He thought of others carrying family burdens, hoping they'd find their stand. His was this house, these walls, this life. He'd never let anyone rewrite him again. What boundary changed your life? As I sit under my Asheville skylight, coffee steaming, I see the scars of this fight, not just for my house, but for my right to be me. I learned that family isn't owed your dreams. It's earned through respect. To anyone carrying others' burdens, your peace is worth defending. Set boundaries, hold your truth, and don't let guilt rewrite you. America's built on standing tall. Claim your space, like I did. What's a boundary you fought for? Drop a 1 in the comments if this hit home, or tell me where you're watching from. Not feeling it? Share why. I'm listening. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more tales that spark the heart.